watching RT documentaries can be an upsetting experience, at least if YouTube warnings are to be believed. Our latest film on armed activists in America from both the extreme left and right has been flagged as potentially offensive. Here's a preview.
The biggest political event of the last 4 years is happening amid the coronavirus pandemic, an unprecedented level of civil unrest sparked by the death of George Floyd, and the rise of the radical groups on both sides of the political spectrum.
What you've seen here was only a taste of what's about to happen.
If you want a war, let it begin with us.
We're going to meet these groups and their leaders to find out how far they're ready to go to fight for what they believe is good for this country.
Well, there are different versions of the YouTube warning for the documentary. It depends on the language settings. Russian speakers are told the material could frighten or shock some users. For English-speaking viewers, it's branded, quote, offensive or inappropriate to some audiences. And to watch it, you have to sign in and prove your age. Earlier, my colleague Jacqueline Vuga spoke with the creator of the work.
Of course, it's not exactly the kids' content. It is about American radical groups and people who are heavily involved in the protest movements that is on the rise, especially in this days and months before the election. But I think in this documentary, there is nothing that is overkill or over the top. And for me, it is really weird and strange why it was flagged, and especially the way it was flagged. So we have two-fold notification system in place for this particular documentary, and that is weird. This is something unheard of, I think.
Well, and as we were mentioning there, you actually have to log in. So for me personally, I tried to just open up YouTube, Google it, and open it up and look at it, and it said you have to sign in. I don't have a YouTube account, which means that certain people are not going to be able to access this movie. Whereas I looked, when I just searched in YouTube for one of the groups that you said was in the film, the Boogaloo Boys, there's plenty of documentaries of news stories about this group where they're talking about their doctrine, where they're standing there with guns, and you'd think it would be about the same thing. Is that the sort of content that's in the movie? It's these men talking about their beliefs?
Pretty much so. So, yeah, we spoke to the members of Boogaloo movement. These are heavily armed guys who are not afraid to come out to protest, although none of them are criminals, outlaws in any possible way. So it's not that we were talking with, bad people or criminals. No, they are just regular citizens, but they are heavily involved in protests, but it's not against the law, right, in the U.S.
Would you say that anything they spoke about would have been considered radical?
I wouldn't say so. Some of the things that they were mentioning are quite disturbing if you think about it, because they were talking about the looming civil conflict in the U.S., about the deep division and polarization that is taking place in the country, about the probable upcoming revolution, whatever that means. But it's not that they were, getting into any kind of specifics. And we have a special waiver before the film saying that, just watch out, guys, there might be some disturbing content. So we already announced that to our audience.
We've asked YouTube to explain why that documentary was labelled potentially offensive. We are awaiting their reply. But it's not the first example of RT material flagged online. Before the US election, Twitter marked one of our reports as misleading, meaning that it couldn't be shared. Twitter has rules against manipulating or interfering in elections, but in fact that video was an account of ballot fraud allegations that had been made by the Trump campaign and that were being widely reported elsewhere. Independent journalist Luke Rive gave us his view on the way that videos are being censored on major online platforms.
This is crazy. They have gone much too far. Before, as you say, if you put Hitler or nudity on Facebook or Twitter or the others, it was stopped immediately. Fine, no problem. But now they venture into the political world. There are the things that you can say and those that you can't, especially if it comes from RT, if it comes from Russia. Everybody knows that every American has an assault rifle and a submachine gun in the cupboard. There are too many weapons in America, and when you have hotheads on the left or on the right, in the streets, ready to fight each other, it's really dangerous for democracy. And this must be shown so that the people realize how far America is going. The young guys, obviously certainly very young, who are doing the job of selecting what is good or bad, don't know really about all this. They're relatively new to politics, to the old-time politics. So maybe they don't really know what they do. It's just the beginning of censorship being put in place in America, especially for Russian news.